Hey guys, it's Donald the Solo RPG Guy here. I'm going to go over Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, a game by Ken St. Andre. Back when D&D was young, this was tagged as the second role-playing game to be invented. In watching other videos and other people talk, and this being a solo RPG channel, and the fact that everybody claims that Tunnels and Trolls is probably one of the best games to play solo, I finally went ahead and decided to jump in and take a look at it. Now, I will warn you, number one, this game is somewhat math heavy. You might need to keep a calculator nearby. Um, Number two, everything, if you're familiar with the D20 systems, or most other role-playing games out there, not just the D20 system, where there's a rule that covers every little thing as far as combat, strength bonuses and dex bonus to AC and all those little bonuses and stuff we're used to. You kind of have to throw that out the window. Tunnels and Trolls takes a different approach to that, and I'm going to go over the game real quick and go over all that stuff. All right, so let's see here. First thing I'm going to do is change the view on this. You got your standard table of contents. Um, no point in going over that. You can just take a quick look and see what that's about. Gives the introduction, a word about the origination of the rules, and then playing the game. But of course, if you're familiar with RPGs, you're familiar with most of that. Of course, you got to create a character. There, as you can see, 8 attributes that you roll on. You roll your standard 3d6 and put the values where they belong. One of the crazy little things they've added is during the process of character creation, if you roll triples on your 3d6, roll the dice again and add what you rolled on your triples. So you can start off with a character with some pretty outrageous stats. That was something interesting. Never seen that before. And then it goes over what the stats mean. Of course, if you're familiar with role-playing games, you know what they are. Now, here's where the game makes that sudden left turn. Instead of there being a strength bonus to hit and a dexterity bonus to your armor class and a constitution bonus to your hit points and all that stuff we're familiar with, the game instead takes all that and boils it down into personal adds. Now, what personal adds are, you will receive a bonus on your strength, luck, dex, and speed if they're above average. It's 1 point above 12. For every point above 12, you get a point to your personal adds. Now remember that. And then it also discusses what a saving throw is. In Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, not only is a saving throw similar to what you're used to in other role-playing games, dodging the fireball, making your save versus poison, saving versus spell, that kind of stuff. A saving roll is also your skill check. So if you wanted to jump a chasm, bash down a door, it's assigned a level, and that level will determine what the number is. And usually it's against one of your ability scores. Here it's using the luck value. Of course, you can make it versus whatever ability score you need. Bashing down a door would be versus strength. Uh, Saving versus poison might be versus constitution. Uh, Ducking a fireball might be dexterity. Again, it's your game. Do it the way you want, but that is just what it recommends. You get your standard character sheet, and then it talks about your character types. Types in this game are basically your classes. And there's 3 basic classes only. Although There are rules for additional types, but there's basically three. You've got your warriors, you got your wizards, and you got your rogues. Warriors are what you expect to be. These are people who are trained in fighting. Wizards are those trained in magic. Now, rogues doesn't necessarily mean thief. A rogue means anything else that is not something that is specifically geared towards the sword and board and the weapon use and that kind of thing, or the wizard that's more, spends all his life studying. This is the guy that's picked up a little bit of both along the way, and usually has more talents and things of that nature. And then it goes over warrior, what their bonuses are. The warriors here get like a weapon bonus. They do an additional d6 per level um, when they attack, and I'll go over that when I go over combat. Um, you got an armor bonus. Armor in this game absorbs damage, but with the warrior using your skills, a warrior can have their armor absorb up to double, although doing that causes extra wear and tear on your armor. Wizards can cast spells, of course. They have spell training. They have a focus affinity. They're limited in their combat skill, and it goes over that. Rogues, they're like the catch-all. They can have skills like magical attunement, where they start off with any one spell in which they have the requisite IQ and dex to cast. They're extremely talented. And then at 7th level, they can make a decision whether they're going to veer more towards the mage type, veer more towards a warrior type, or just stay a straight rogue. And then there's the rules for that. And then there's what's called specialists. Specialists are, like I said before, when you roll up your ability scores, if you roll a triple on one of your ability scores, and then of course you re-roll an add, whatever that particular attribute is, they have what they call specialists attuned to that attribute that you can then be a specialist. These are like rangers, masterminds, things of that nature. And when we get to that part of the book, we'll go over that. All right, so continuing on, it goes over kindreds, which is just their word for races. You can play humans, you can play dwarves, and you can see here when you roll up your ability scores how they're modified. You basically multiply whatever you roll times this number. So dwarves are extremely strong and healthy, but not quite as lucky. And they also have a height and weight table. Elves are a little more dexterous, a little more smarter, more wizard power, more charismatic, but not as healthy. They also have fairies, leprechauns, and hobs. Hobs is their word for halflings. And then you go into things like height, weight, your possessions. Starting off money is usually 3d6 plus, well, not plus 8, 3d6 times 10. And silver pieces. Most of the stuff you'll find here is expressed in silver pieces. It goes over your weight, how much you can carry. There's an example character sheet. You might also want to give your character a background or something along those lines. And then talks about character progression. In this game, they have adventure points, which is the same thing as experience points. You get experience points for slaying creatures, making your saving throws, casting spells, and certain special events. Slaying monsters, you get experience points equal to their MR. Saving throws, you get AP points equivalent to whatever you rolled. I don't recall right offhand spellcasting and special events, but if I remember when I get to that point, I will point it out. Your character level. Now, in this particular game, you're not earning experience points in order to gain levels. This is just a way to determine your general power level overall. And it's real simple. You take your highest ability score and divide it by 10. And whatever number you come up with, that is your character level. A rough estimation, like I said, of your character's overall power. So if you have a very low attribute, like it says here, if you have a 1 through 9, you're a 0 level character. 10 through 19 your first, 20 through 19 your second, and so on. And that's how you determine your character's level. And then it goes over the equipment and equipping your character. It's got a whole plethora of weapons. It'll tell you your damage, your strength required, dex required, the cost, in this case GP, weight units, and ranges. I may be wrong. Maybe your starting gold isn't, or maybe your starting money isn't gold. I could be wrong. But you can always go back and look at that page again if you need to. But as you can see, they have a whole ton of weapons, armor, special designs, like if it was forged by a great blacksmith, it's heavier, lighter, made out of stone, forged in dragonfire, all kinds of benefits you could change to your weapons. It goes over wear and tear, using unwieldy weapons. In other words, if you're not qualified to carry that weapon, how it affects combat, and whether or not there's a saving throw required to use the weapon even. It goes over repairing your weapon, poisons, provisions and other equipment, your backpack type stuff. Saving throws, like I went over before, that takes care of both, you're dodging the fireball, you're resisting the poison. It's also, like I said, your talents. All right, we're going to continue on here. Here it talks about, like I said, the adventure points for saving throws. And then your talents. Talents are basically your skills. If you get one talent I think you get one talent for every level. Rogues start off with an extra talent. Rogues get extra talents as they progress in levels. And essentially, if you're making a saving throw for something, and one of these talents apply, then you will get a flat +3 bonus. Now, there are expanded rules in the back of the book that takes this even a step further. So let's say, let's take something simple. Let's say we're doing a hex crawl, and our character is trying to do some survival, or some hunting, or some fishing, or some camping, and he has that particular skill. When he makes that particular saving throw, he'll get a +3 bonus on that saving throw. Which, of course, the extra +3 bonus will equate an extra +8 adventure points. So you'll level up just a little bit quicker if you start utilizing your skills in a proper manner, of course. And then it talks about the monsters, a monster rating. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you is that in this particular game, you won't find a bestiary. It is recommended that the DM, or in this case, if you're solo playing, you make up your own monsters. Now, you can do these monsters as simple or as detailed as you like. You could just assign them a monster rating, and that will determine their number of a dice for attack. Or you could actually go through the process of rolling them up like a character to figure out their individual combat adds and such. Combat. Combat is kind of one of those things that kind of threw me off, because this is where you take all that D20 knowledge you have, or any other role-playing game, and throw it out the window. Essentially, what you will do is you and all the PCs, or all who's on one side of the fight, will roll their dice, add their combat adds, and come up with one number. The enemy will do the same. And then you will compare those two numbers. And then depending on the difference between the two, that is the amount of damage inflicted. So let's just say hypothetically, the PCs rolled collectively a 30, and the monsters rolled collectively a 25. You will do 5 points of damage to that side. And then that 5 points of damage is subtracted from the monster rating, and you go from there if you're using the monster rating method. If you have fully detailed your character out, then you will take that damage and apply it to the constitution of the monsters you're fighting. And you pretty much just arbitrarily decide who's going to take the damage. Here it actually goes over what I just stated. They have this thing called spite damage. Now, what spite damage is damage that goes through no matter what, irregardless of your armor and other protection. When you roll all these d6s, and this game uses nothing but d6s, every time you roll a 6 during combat, you do 1 spite damage to the opposing side. And then it talks about missile weapons. Now, missile weapons are completely different. Missile weapons are done outside of combat, per se. What I described to you before was the melee part. But when it comes to using ranged weapons and ranged spells, what you will do is you will make a saving throw roll. Let me go ahead and blow up this chart some. Blow up this chart here. Depending on the size of your target and how far away they are, this will determine the level of saving throw required to hit the target. If you hit your target, then you will do the appropriate damage accordingly. So let's just say large creatures 5 to 10 feet, so that's your average humanoid, and they are 6 to 50 yards away. You'll make a level 2 saving throw, probably versus dexterity. And if you hit, you will roll the weapons damage, and then the creature will take that damage automatically, minus, of course, its armor, if it has armor or anything special like that. That's how they do melee or missile combat. Going back through here. Here it breaks it down where you can actually combine the two, the missile and the melee, but you still got to keep the missile damage separate, because if you hit, it will go through. You'll just have to read this section. If what I said didn't make any sense, this will explain it to you thoroughly. They do have guns in this world if you want to use the guns as far as that's concerned. If you don't have weapons, they talk about unarmed combat. The martial arts specialist, if you want to be like a monk or something that specializes in martial arts, they got rules for that. Special type of combat called berserker combat. I'm not going to go over that. That's a little bit detailed. But if you get the book, you can read through it, or, pause this video and read what you see there. Here it gives an example of the berserker combat. Other special combat situations, using 2 or more weapons, how to stun your opponent, the basic elements of combat, and evaluating combat, how to do it in order, surprise, magic, missile, melee, the actual fight itself, calculating the damage, resolving magic, resolving missiles, and distributing the damage. It looks complicated, but in reality, it is quite easy once you've read it a couple times. Like I said, I've been playing D&D 3rd edition most of my life, so this took me a couple reads to finally get through my thick skull and understand. But now that I've got it through my thick skull and understand it, it's quite easy. Here's a basic combat to-do list, which puts everything in order for you. It describes the saving throws again, general bookkeeping. Like I said, this is a math-heavy game. You will want, scratch paper to do the math, or a calculator or something along those lines to greatly help you and speed things along. Because I did a couple of mock combats just to see, and yes, it does take a little bit of math work. Not complicated math. As long as you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you should be all right. And then it talks about the adventure points again. And then it goes into a whole thing of magic. Magic here is point-based, based on your wizardry score. And then it talks about how magic works. There are requirements for the levels of spells, what IQ you must have and what dex you must have in order to be able to cast those spells. Talks about how to power up your spells. And then it just literally goes into great detail about, there it is, adventure points for spell casting. You get adventure points equal to the actual whiz cost of all spells they cast. This is a personal effort expended. After deductions for all your advantages and whatnot, benefits the caster comes into question. So it gives a rule there of how to do the AP points for casting spells if you're a spellcaster. Goes over the types of different damage, spell interacting and stacking rules. Prevent those people from stacking spells on top of each other in a cheating kind of way. The various schools of magic, how to memorize spells, and here's an example spell, oh, go away. And then there goes over 18 levels worth of spells. Quick flip through all those real quick. All right, then it gets into tools of the trade for magic users. The rules on staves. Certain types of staves have certain abilities. Because a wizard is not trained in combat, they're kind of limited on their combat ability. Typically, no more than 2d6 weapons are allowed. Some of their staves can hold PowerPoint and things of that nature. It discussed the benefits of using a wand, wards and magical little trinkets, and then it goes into poisons a little bit, and magic items, which, if you're playing a role-playing game, you're going to want to come across some magic items for your characters. Here's where it talks about power batteries, being able to store spell power into inanimate objects, creating new spells, and then a section of how to put it all together, how to prepare, and then stuff like how to be a good DM, how to be a better player, getting it all together, and then a list of all the spells again, alphabetically, so you can easily find them, and then the spell creators. The next section is called Elaboration. Elaborations are basically rules expansions if you want to add more depth to your game, alternate ideas and suggestions to customize your house rules. So it just goes into that. If you want to use training, rules about warriors, magic, how it may be broken down, that only, elves know these spells, dwarves know these spells, hobs know these spells, things of that nature. You want to go that kind of route. More rules on rogues. Here's where it talks about, I mentioned earlier that if you roll triples while making your character, you can become a specialist. Well, it gives rules if you're a specialist in strength, specialist in dexterity, specialist in constitution, specialist in speed, intelligence, wizardry, charisma, luck, citizens, which is like your average run-of-the-mill commoner, so to speak. Then it goes more into talent. There is also another type of class called Paragons. These are the creme of the creme. This is like if Conan was born with more steroids in his body than he already has, or Gandalf was 10 times smarter than the Gandalf actually is. Characters that are extremely blessed with extremely high ability scores from the start. And then it talks about other playable races, which is what you can use as a basis to help create your monsters, because breaks them all down into different classes and whatnot. But you got your good kindreds, the familiar ones like your centaur, your gnomes, your goblins, your gremlins, hobgoblins, kobolds, vampires, werewolves, things of that nature. Then the less common ones, harpies, ogres, lizardmen, merfolk, ratlings, trolls, and the extraordinary demons, dragons, ghouls, ghast, man-apes, nagas, rock trolls. Basically, the really big bad guys. And as you can see here, that's what I did for when I was testing this. I actually just used the stats here. If I was wanting to fight a harpy, I rolled up a harpy. If I wanted to fight a goblin, I wrote the stats for a goblin just to see how combat would work. And then it also talks about how you can go ahead and it gives a general description of the various monsters. So you can use this as a basis to start creating your own monsters for your own world. Of course, if you have any DM experience, you've probably already done that once or twice, so that's nothing new. Languages, how to learn languages, use languages, things of that nature. Taking the talents and extending them to not just giving you a flat +3 on your bonuses, but going up a novice, apprentice, journeyman, and master paths. Of course, you will have to have a minimum attribute and how much it costs in the adventure points to level those up. So if you wanted to go that detailed, you could. Another list of talents. Talks about if you want to use miniatures, positioning, movement, breaking away from fight, virtual tabletops. Basically all those little extra add-ons you can throw in there. If you're a person that likes to use miniatures, of course, goes over that in good detail. Again, it's your game. You can do it any way you want. And then they got here what's called the kitchen sink. It's got a treasure chart, a generic wandering monster chart for dungeons, wilderness, and an urban setting. Of course, your world, you're free to create your own, which is what I'm going to do. And then it goes into things like the calendar, various guilds in the game world, how to handle locks and traps, more things about guns, the reality of dice, where he goes over basically the mechanics of the dice. If you want to alter that just a little bit, you're getting tired of rolling buckets of dice because you got a 20d6 character fighting a 25d6 monster. It breaks that down. Animal barding, various types of steeds, and then an atlas of the troll world. Of course, you're free to create your own world. But just like any other campaign setting, it's basically got all the generic information, languages, cities, who trades with who, who's at war with who, all that good stuff that makes a campaign. You get a couple of little maps to use. So I'm just going to flip through this real quick. Adventures. You've got solitaire adventure for dead characters, which at the rate this game plays, you probably going to have a dead character sooner or later anyway. And it's got that adventure there. If you don't want to be spoiled, don't watch that. And then it's got another adventure in here specifically for if you're playing with a game master. Of course, we're playing solo, so you might have to adopt this if you decide to play this adventure yourself solo. Or if you're already DM and you need an adventure for your group, well, there you go. It's got all that goodness. And then you got like a weapons glossary here. It gives you pictures of all the various weapons, just in case you don't know what a particular weapon looks like, and a description of each of the weapons. And then, of course, your index. Now, that is my quick general overview of Tunnels and Trolls. And now I'm going to switch to my camera and just discuss a few things. Now I'm going to go ahead and discuss my thoughts on the game in general. Who's this game for? Well, this game, if you're DMing a group and you want simplified type combat, it's obviously, you could do that. But out of all the games out there, this was the one that had the most solo support. So, which is one of the reasons why I decided to check out the game. After all, this is a solo RPG channel. And for the solo person, I think if you don't mind doing a little bit of math, and doing some number crunching, this would be a pretty good game for you. I made up a couple of characters. Here's one of them, an elvish rogue. And I used him. I made a dwarvish fighter and a human fighter. And I just did some basic combat just to get used to the rules. And it didn't take me long to figure the combat rules out at all. Combat wound up being simple and easy. And then I started thinking, well, this game does have the most solo support out there with all the little solo adventure modules. But I was watching some playthroughs of those modules and I noticed something. The module would say this is for a first or second or third level character, no more than this or that in ads. And then as a guy would play through the game, the second combat he came across was some giant rock troll that he has absolutely no chance of defeating. I mean, it's like you might as well just have your characters walk in and, they're going to die. No point even playing that particular solo game. So I was like, how can I adapt this for my type of solo play? Well, we all know about this, how that works, so I don't have to go too much into that. Then I also grabbed my other new toy, the Axebane's Deck of Many Dungeons, and said, how can I convert this? Well, one way I figured out to convert this is the formula I'm using for saving throws is you take your character level, you add the level of the dungeon you're on, take those two numbers, divide it in two, and that's the saving throw level required to open locks, find traps if there's a trap on the card, maybe give a small percentage chance that on a roll of a d6, a 1 it's easier, a 6 it's harder, it goes up or down one level. Of course, monsters, the game requires that you make your own monsters. Well, you got a monster list here, or of course you can make your own. One of the things I did was I created some monsters. This is, I literally looked up the goblin stats. When you roll up a goblin as a player character, rolled him up, was able to figure out his combat adds and whatnot. And from that, I was able to figure out a monster rating. So if I'm fighting a lone goblin, I've got the stats for that. If I'm fighting a group of goblins, I know what the MR rating is, so I can use whichever form of combat is best for the situation. Made an ogre here, although that was a waste of time because, well, like I said in the books, fighting those trolls, dying real easy. Well, this guy had combat adds of plus 47. He was stomping my character's butt round one. So I was able to basically create my own monsters. I can either utilize the monster charts provided or just make up my own monster charts. So, and then of course, when you get to the quest room, that's where you fight a baddie. He will at least be 1 or 2 levels higher than the party level. Another problem I was having with my other RPGs I was running solo is the problem of running multiple characters and keeping track of every little thing. Guess what? When it comes to combat and tunnels and trolls, I really don't have to. All I gotta do is figure out if I have a wizard, if he's gonna cast some spells, if I have a ranger type or someone who's using range methods, do that. And then when it came to melee, it was easy to mesh it all together and fight, 5 characters versus a dozen orcs and see what happens. Combat wound up over time being real easy. So adapting it to solo play for dungeon crawling was really easy. And I've also come up with a method now using the basis of my Forbidden Lands, which is a solo hex, well, not solo, but a hex crawl game in general, and converting that over to Tunnels and Trolls rules. So I have yet another role-playing game at my disposal. So if I want to run multiple characters, I don't have that headache of worrying about every little individual movement, every little plus to hit, who does damage to who, keeping track of hit points, or none of that. So, if you don't mind a little math, you don't mind abstract combat, you don't mind, creating your own monsters, then you might want to look at Tunnels and Trolls. There are many editions out there. Tunnels and Trolls hasn't changed much since it came out back in the late 70s, early 80s, whenever it came out. So You can probably go to Drivethru RPG. I've got the newest edition from them. Thanks to you guys for supporting me. Whoever, you know, if you use the links below for Drivethru RPG and you make any purchases, not just whatever the link goes to, I get a little bit of that money, and that money goes to support the channel so I can purchase these products, review them, bring them to you. And then, of course, if you have questions, you know how to do all that standard YouTube stuff. Comments below. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. You have questions, put them down there. I'll try to get to them. But Tunnels and Trolls, I do recommend that you do check it out. Even if you don't plan on using the rule system, it's a good read. If you're used to the D20 systems and all those other systems out there, this kind of will open your mind up in a different direction. Like I said, the idea of abstract combat was throwing me off a little bit, but with just a little bit of patience, I was able to figure it out. And now I've got me a game where if I want to run 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 characters in a dungeon, no problem. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video. And until the next video, happy gaming!